is the sound of redemption. This is the way that we bring it down. Down, down, 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 down. Igniting the fire within you. Exalting the melody of freedom. These are the things that will bring it down. Down, down, 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 down. So gather the faithful. Tell everyone to stand and shout loud. Shout loud. Shout loud. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it way down. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it down, down. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it way down. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it down, down. Down, down, down.
Let me tell you, it's in the air. Joy is in the air. Love is in the air. Can you feel it? What it feel like? Freedom. What it feel like? Don't sleep on it, brother. You might get left, sister. Can you feel it? What it feel like? Freedom. What it feel like? Justice. No need to be counted, cause I am down. Down, down, down. Down, down, down. Down for the end of racism, for the end of bigotry, cause I am down. For the end of misogyny, that's right. For all the isms out there, just down, down, down. Let's bring it down. Rise up, people. No more foolishness, and let's bring it way down.
Riding the river of change into the cries of contrition. This is the way that we bring it down. Down, down, 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 down. We are the children of Eden, dancing and celebrating freedom. We are the ones that must bring it down. Down, down, 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 down. So gather the faithful. Tell everyone to stand and shout loud. Shout loud. Shout loud. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it way down. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it down, down. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it way down. Let's bring it down. We've got to bring it down. Down. Stand up and shout. Stand up and shout. Rise together.
Accountability starts now. The Eric Dawson Radio Show.
Yeah. Rise up. Stand up, shouting loud.
If you are not prepared to come to that table and to represent that voice, don't come. Because we don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. We don't need black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't need Muslims that don't want to be a Muslim voice. We don't need queers that don't want to be a queer voice. And if you're worried about being marginalized and stereotyped, please don't even show up.
Nobody can give you independence. Nobody can give you freedom. Nobody can give you equality or justice or anything. If you're a man, you take it. If you can't take it, you don't deserve it. Nobody can give it to you. I'm for anybody who's for freedom. I'm for anybody who's for justice. I'm for anybody who's for equality. I'm not for anybody who tells me to sit around and wait for mine.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Eric Dawson Radio Show. I hope everybody is staying away from everybody else. Fist bump, elbow bump, but stay away from everybody because coronavirus is here. I'm telling you. Listen, I'm not going outside. I'm in a bubble. Did you see the movie Man in a Bubble, a Boy in a Bubble? That's me. I'm in a bubble. Don't bother me. Don't even call me because it may be transmitted through the phone lines. I don't know now because the president is lying. He said that everybody can get tested. His vice president said people can't get tested. They said there were no deaths. Now there are deaths. He's saying all this information that's misinformation, and he's calling the news fake news. So I don't know what's going on. All I know is if you need toilet paper, I got 2-ply toilet paper at $1,000 a roll because they're almost out at the stores, and I got water for $100 a bottle. Anyway, welcome to the Eric Dawson Radio Show. I got as a guest online Sudan Thomas, former president of the Jersey City Board of Education, and I got the one and only Diane L. Murray Clements. You know what, Diane? I need an audience applause button. I just realized that.
Is that good enough for you? Eric,
that was fantastic.
I feel like I've been on a year-long vacation, but I'm back.
But you're back. Well, and I'm glad to have you back, Diane.
Thank you. And I can totally understand how you feel about the coronavirus. My husband is like way crazy. I went to the grocery store the other day, and it must have been yesterday. There must have been like 20 people in the store, including me. I was like, dang, nobody want to come out. They scared.
Listen, they're closing schools. And we're going to have a conversation about this in a minute, but literally, we're going to talk about the coronavirus. We're going to talk about the election, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things. But we do have a guest on the phone, and we were trying to Skype people, and we weren't able to get it done. Technology can be a mother sometimes. But the next time we're going to have Sudan Thomas because he's a very handsome guy. So we're gonna have him on Skype, and you guys will be able to see him and talk to and engage with him. But welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Salam alaikum. Good morning.
Walaikum
I'm fine.
assalam.
I'm fine. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having me over, and Diane, it's great to be with you on this show as well.
Good morning.
And so we have.
A lot going to Sultan.
Say what, Diane?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm clearing my voice. I said, Sultan, you have a lot going on with you in Jersey City. What the hell is happening with you? The last time we spoke, you were running for the Board of Ed. Now they done put you off the Board of Ed. Now you got all this crap going on. What's happening there?
Hey, that's life. What's new? It's nothing new.
That's politics in New Jersey, in Hudson County especially, right?
Hey, when you have the President of the United States saying there's no virus, it's a setup, I mean, what chance do we have?
Isn't that crazy? I mean, literally, people are dying. There are new cases in Connecticut now. There are new cases in New Jersey now. I think Teaneck was the one I heard about. There are cases popping up all over the place. And he's going, this is all fake news. Don't pay attention to it. They're setting me up. He said, the Democrats hate me. They're politicizing it.
So Eric, if I may just weigh in on, this is not my wheelhouse, but if I may just weigh in, because we all had front row view seats to what happened with Katrina, 9/11 generation and everything else. I think that what's happening now is that we are finding out what was already there for a couple of days, because the tests are essentially confirming that folks have this. And so I think the more tests that go out there, the more folks get tested, you're going to get a lot of positives. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, so I want to be absolutely clear. But I don't think that this means that there is a tipping point or it's going crazy. I think the tests are basically manifesting the fact that this is already here and it's there. Now, because of what happened with Katrina and everything else, this president has a vested interest to lie his way through this, and just as he lies about everything else. So he's trying to make believe that everything is okay when it actually is not. So, he's put Pence into this role, and the fact that the president of the United States and the vice president are constantly contradicting each other, doesn't give us any confidence. But parents out there who have their kids in school, I think what happened last week was the Department of Education, they put out an advisory on how to deal with the situation if we go into a short-term or a long-term closing of schools. In Jersey City, we have 33,000 children. Again, I'm not on the board, but if you look at it, about 20,000 households, half of those households don't have access to the internet. So even if the Department of Education plan of doing a long-distance learning is implemented, these kids don't have access to internet at home. So that's the first thing.
I tell you what I say, Diane. When America gets a cold, black people got pneumonia.
Well, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
What Susan just said, I was speaking to my daughter who's an educator in New York City,
yep.
And she said with her kids, and she has kindergarten and first grade, the majority of those families don't have computers. So if they shut down the schools, they're just looking to extend their summers. That's basically what they already have in their mind, that our summers are going to be longer to make up for these missed days. The other thing is Bill de Blasio in New York is talking about he's going to mandate all of the EMT, first responders, and educators to be tested. However, that's unrealistic because I spoke to a friend over the weekend who works for the CDC and says they don't have enough testing kits to test everybody.
That's right.
For him to put out that information is false information.
Right.
Then there was the, not Attorney General, what is the guy from the health department? The Surgeon General from the health department spoke out on CNN, and he too has not really come out to say blatantly what the issue is, let alone that there is not enough testing, and he won't say anything against what the president is saying. He's kind of trying to stay neutral and give no.
He works for him.
Right.
What do you expect? I think he's going to lose his job.
But I agree with what Sudan is saying. What Sudan is saying is this: all the tests are going to do is reveal what we already suspect right now, which is that you have a lot of people who are infected. And so the more they can, the more they can stunt the tests, right, by either saying they don't have enough or whatever the case may be, that big number is not coming out right now. But there is a huge number of people, I'm convinced. But beyond that, we talked about the schools. You know what else I read this morning? Do you know that judges are suspending courtrooms?
Yeah.
So understand what I'm saying to you now. So
That's
judges
serious,
are suspending courtroom sessions. So people who are in jail right now, right, they're not getting their hearings because they're suspending courtroom sessions. So once again, when America has a cold, black people got pneumonia. Because when we look at mass incarceration, we look at the disproportionate number of black people who are in jail. Those people will be sitting in jail because the judges have suspended, in some of these cities, they have suspended the courtroom session. I mean, I want you to understand this. So now, see, this is what gets to me, guys. So when you say, I don't politic, I don't do politics, I don't get involved in politics, I want you to understand how, like a sledgehammer, politics and policies are going to come down and whack you right on the top of your goddamn head right now. All of it is coming down on you because you don't want to get involved. Your kids are going to be pushed further behind in terms of education, as Sudan said, Diane said, because you don't have technology, because you're not working, you're not making sure that those local elected officials that you elect, simply because that's your boy or that's your girl or you know them, you've seen them in the hood, you see them putting work in, right? But they're really not doing the job they need to be doing to make sure that everything is solid and competitive in our communities when things like this occur. And now who do you blame? It ain't Trump's fault.
Right.
This is not Trump's fault. Let us be clear. Now, Trump on the tail end, because like I said, he is a symptom, right? So the lies that he tells, all of these things, but there's no different than the lies that have been told in your own communities. Whether we talk about Newark and the cancer carcinogens in the water and the lead in the water, those were lies. So why is what Trump's telling a bigger lie? It's a lie. You see, so you can't step over this lie, forgive this lie, and then go down to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and talk about that guy lying. He is a product of a disgusting, horrible political system here. But all of your elected officials lie. And that's why we have Sudan Thomas on today, because he's going to talk about the lies that are taking place in Jersey City. See, so let us not just look at the President of the United States. This is a symptom. It is not, he is not the disease. He is simply a symptom. And we have to tear the entire thing down. Did I say that right, Diane?
Yeah, you're good. So Sudan.
Diane, listen. So you guys know, before we get in, Diane, you can start. But before we get in, I want you guys to know again that I am hypoglycemic, which means that when I get excited like this, right, my head starts to get a little woozy.
Oh, come on, Eric. You got an excuse to get excited now? You have actually a doctor's letter to say why you're getting excited? Come on.
I do. And you know what? And I told Diane I don't have coffee in my mug. I have orange juice in there because when I feel that drop, I got to drink the orange juice. Otherwise, I'll fall off this stool that I'm sitting on. And then our ratings will go up.
Absolutely. So Sudan, for those who don't know you, you're a Jersey City guy. I know you won a Jersey City school board. You were the president at some time, and then in January the hammer came down, and then you were accused of and facing charges for what they say is embezzlement of money of funds, using checks to funnel back into your nonprofit. As well as using the funds for family vacations to Hawaii. I had a great time in Hawaii. It's beautiful. And to pay personal items. So what do you say? What can you say in regard to these charges? And do you have an attorney? And does your attorney allow you to be on the phone right now with us talking about this open case?
Well, we're not talking about the case. We're scheduled to talk today about the funding and budget crisis of Jersey City. But I'll tell you what I've told everybody publicly all along, that these inferences that have been recorded in documents, complaints rather, they are not true, and I will be fighting vigorously to prove my innocence, and that's pretty much it. I'm not going to try the case on this channel because the purpose of this call was to talk about the funding crisis and the budget crisis that Jersey City School Board is being faced with. Just to give you a bit of my background, the hammer didn't come down in January. My term ended on December 31st, actually January 2nd, 2020. And I was the president of the school board for 2 full years, 2018, 2019. And I was the vice president of the school board for 2017. And these inferences, which are captured in the complaints, which you are referring to, do not pertain to my work at the school board, but actually pertain to my work as a executive director of the employment agency in Jersey City, which again, to summarize my last 3 years of work between the school board and the employment agency, my work has directly been able to influence the presentation to the public of public corruption of more than $250 million. And various forensic audits carried out in the school district, in the employment agency, and the city municipality of Jersey City, documented forensic audits have been recorded in the public domain, exposing public corruption to that tune. In addition, I took the lead, and I was the lead plaintiff in a comprehensive constitutional challenge against the state of New Jersey for underfunding the school district of Jersey City by over $2.1 billion. That has been the hallmark of my work for the last 3 years. And like I said, as far as these complaints are concerned, they are complaints, and they will be dealt with in the relevant forums. The purpose of me coming on the call today was to talk about the funding crisis that's faced by Jersey City School Board, and there's a lot of stuff that we need to talk about, and I can't wait to get started.
Right, I understand that, but people need to get a background because there are some open charges there, and people have questions and want to know, how is it that you transitioned from or at the same time was the council president. I'm sorry, the school board president, and then become employed by the city.
I was never employed by the city. I was never employed by the city at all. All of these positions we are referring to are volunteer positions. Private agency. I've never been on the payroll of the city, and I don't intend to be on public payroll.
So, as the executive director of the Jersey City Employment and Training Program, that was a volunteer position. That didn't have a salary attached.
Yes.
Okay.
That was a volunteer position.
All right. We had a call. Go.
Good morning, guys. Darren Martin here. How you doing?
Doing well.
Good morning.
So, Sudan, I got to push back a little bit on you, my brother. You know, I'm a Jersey City guy as well. I don't live there anymore. Still very active in Jersey City, especially the political scene and community organizing.
Well, I thank you for your service. I'm sure our paths have crossed at some point.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Not many people don't know me in Jersey City. Let me just get straight to it.
Hey, Darren, your phone is not clear. It's muffled.
Oh, okay. So let me. I'll pull back. Let me go back to my other line. I'll pull it back.
All right.
So, Eric, I want to be clear again. Purpose of this call is to talk about the Jersey City School Board budget. I'm not going to be trying the case or the complaint, and I want to keep the conversation focused on the funding challenges faced by Jersey City School Board.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. We have no problem with that. But Susan, you can't not address when.
I think, Diana, I've already addressed it.
He's answered the question.
I have addressed it very publicly with a statement, and I have, reiterated my statement at the top of this interview, and there is nothing else really for me to add about it.
Right, but I understand that. But what I'm saying is, it's hard to go in and talk about the funding and budgeting of an organization when there have been complaints against you, as you have stated. And it's also hard for people in the public to understand what is actually going on when it now seems like that you are against the same mayor that you were friends with when you were in your position as the council president.
Well, Diane, just to be absolutely clear, I'm still friends with the mayor. I'm not against the mayor. Okay, I have serious concerns about the funding problem that he has put out. I think the words you stated that I'm against the mayor. I never said I'm against the mayor. I'm against the plan that he's put out. Having said that, if you look back on my presidency, the 6 major decisions that I made as a president of the school board were not decisions that the mayor was in support of. So I may be friends with the mayor, and my 2 years as the president, as the vice president before that, will mark the greatest cooperation between the city and the school board as public bodies. That doesn't mean that we as a board or a public body took direction from the mayor, or I allowed my personal friendship with the mayor to influence outcomes in the school board. To give you an example, the mayor was the person who was instrumental in bringing the former superintendent of schools, Dr. Lyles, into the school district. And as you know, under my presidency, Dr. Lyles was replaced with another superintendent. This is something that he was not in favor of. And I can give you many such examples. In fact, under my presidency, the school board launched a historic initiative of auditing the pilots and the abatements in the municipality of Jersey City last year in April, way before anybody started talking about anything else. And our audit of just the top 20 of the 170 abatements proved that all 20 were out of compliance going back 3 years and potentially owed in excess of $55 million to the city in back taxes. Now, one could argue that if one was a friend of the mayor, they would not have gone down this rabbit hole. So there are many such examples that I can give you. So yes, we are friends. I would call him my friend. And the period of my leadership in the board also marked the greatest cooperation. We started a comprehensive shared services agreement with the city. And 3 years ago, if you look at it, the city was not contributing any dollars in shared services to the school board. Through my leadership and in cooperation, close working with the mayor, we brought about $5.5 million in shared services. They pay for all of our police officers. That's about $2.5 million. They took over the disposal of all of our garbage and snow. They pay for the gas for all of our buses and our jeeps and our vehicles. So we brought about transformation in the partnership. I mean, if you see the years before that, the previous presidents, they all had a very toxic relationship with the mayor, and nothing was achieved. So when you are the president of the school board who has a budget larger than the city, it is incumbent on you to work with the mayor. And just one last piece on the mayor's piece, because he called me against it. No, I don't. I have a lot of respect for him, and I think he's got a great story behind him. I have a problem with his funding plan, and I've been very open about it. But from a political perspective, in 2017, when he ran for re-election, one of our council candidates, Ward B candidate, was an African-American candidate, Chris Gaston, who's the principal of a high school in Jersey City. And I supported him. And that candidate was running against the mayor's candidate. And the mayor was very, very upset with me over that. So I have a, established track record of having done work, keeping our students and our community, up front. And I have never allowed my decision making to be influenced by my personal relationships or, anything else.
Okay. So now moving on to the underfunding, because I did get an opportunity to read some of the documents, and they're quite disturbing.
It is.
Yeah. Would you just elaborate for the listeners, and then we'll begin to unpack it a little bit.
Sure. So just to give you the history, Eric, when Chris Christie became the governor of New Jersey, I think the problems for Jersey City School Board in terms of the funding, I think they started to happen at that point. So, however you want to look at it, it's called Abbott District or SFRA. There's X amount of dollars that Jersey City needs to get every year for a fully funded or a fully balanced budget. Now, when Christie became the governor, he started underfunding Jersey City School Board by small amounts. When I say small amounts, they are actually big amounts. But in the context of today's picture, they were small amounts. $20-30 million every year for the first 5 years. Now, in 2012-2013, we had a new superintendent. Dr. Lyles took over from the former superintendent, Dr. Epps. When Dr. Lyles took over around 2013, the underfunding moved up drastically from about average $30 million a year to about $100 million. So if you see the first 5 years between 2013, from 29 to 2013, it's about an average of $30 to $40 million. And then from there on, it's about $100+ million. By the time we hit 2018, it was actually $120 million a year.
Can I pause you for 1 second? And I want you to continue. So as this was happening, as the governor was underfunding the school system every year, Governor Christie, every year, where were the elected officials who were supposed to be protecting Jersey City, who were elected on the school board to protect the interests of that school board and of those students?
So Eric, that's a great question, and they did nothing. And so that has been the problem. They did absolutely nothing. For 10 years, they sat on their hands and they watched the district being bankrupted slowly but surely. And by the time we came to 2018, when I became the president, the cumulative underfunding just on the operational budget was slightly in excess of $1 billion. I'm not talking millions now. I'm talking about $1 billion in underfunding. And that's just one part of the problem. The other side of the problem is the infrastructure spending. Now, Jersey City being a urban district, just like Newark and Camden and Patterson, we are Abbott districts. And so the law mandates that infrastructure, capital spending, fixing the schools, repairing schools, building new schools has to be funded by the state. So in 2005, there was a long-range facilities plan that was set up, and every nook and cranny of the school buildings were analyzed. Every wall that had to be fixed, every bathroom that had to be, refurbished, every, ceiling or roof that had to be painted. And they came up with a $1.5 billion plan, which included replacement of 6 school buildings. So this was a long-range facilities plan, which would take 10, 15 years to fix or, implement. In 15 years, the state merely funded $300 million of that $1.5 billion. They were supposed to replace 6 schools. They replaced 5 schools, and they forgot to replace 1 school, okay? And guess what? The 5 schools that were replaced, 3 of them were downtown schools, and 1 of them was in the Heights, which are affluent neighborhoods. The south side of the city, where the brown and black kids live, just got 1 school replaced. But here's the kicker. The 6th school building that they did not replace, you know what that school is? That school is A. Harry Moore. That's a special school for the severely handicapped or displaced kids of Jersey City. We have about 80 kids there. And I would invite you and Diane to come and visit that school someday, just to see the amount of difficulty and challenges that school endures every day, keeping these kids moving. And they didn't replace that. And for me, that it's unconscionable.
That's criminal.
Yes,
that goes beyond unconscionable. So I want to slow down, for people to understand what we're talking about now. Because when we talk about, and when I argue with folks about not having black faces with black voices protecting the issues and concerns of black people, here's where we are right now. When I talk about the fact that we need major policy shifts in order to be competitive, that it's not simply saying to folks, oh, pick yourself up by your own bootstrap, this rugged individualism, that there are actually policies that are keeping us back. And so here's a clear instance where you're saying that that things are set up in such a way, Abbott School District, that the state is supposed to be funding the infrastructure of these schools to make sure that these children have the best opportunity to be competitive. And within the framework of what is supposed to be law, right, protecting them, they operated in a way that showed bias toward affluent communities, right, and deference toward affluent communities to the detriment of the communities where brown and black children are.
And disadvantaged, handicapped kids, severely displaced kids. And here's the thing, it's just not the law that was established by the courts. The New Jersey is the only state in the great nation of the United States where the Constitution mandates that the state is responsible for thorough and efficient education. There is no other constitution, state constitution, which has that guarantee. New Jersey is the only state which states that the public education or a thorough and efficient education is, the state is a guarantor. And the state has failed. And here's the problem, Eric. In the last 30 years, Jersey City did not have local control. It was the state that was running our district. We got full local control under my presidency on October 18th, 2018. But for the 30 years preceding that, the state ran the school district. So this is a classic case of putting the fox in charge of the hen coop, because these guys ran the district. They were responsible also for the funding, and they ran it to the ground. So by the time they left, the district was facing a minus $1.1 billion in cumulative operational underfunding. And on the capital expense side, they had underfunded us by in excess of $1.2 billion. And so what did we do? This is a matter of a lawsuit. We filed a lawsuit in April last year, a comprehensive constitutional challenge on the operational funding piece. And in July, we amended that complaint to include the operational piece. So essentially today, Jersey City is in the courts against the state of New Jersey to ensure that the courts can compel the state to fully fund the district, including the backlog. But here's the kicker. How did the state respond? The state responded with a motion to dismiss our case. Firstly, they took the case out of Hudson County and took it to Kernan, which was fine because they said that's where they are. And then they filed a motion to dismiss. But here's the great news. On January 15th, 2020, which is 2 months ago, the judge denied the state's motion to dismiss, which means we're on our way to trial. And Eric, if you look at the history of our nation, when it comes to the matters of education, right from Brown versus Board all the way to Abbott, which is local New Jersey, it's the courts that have had to step in to right the wrong. And we're very confident that ultimately justice will prevail for the 33,000 children of Jersey City, and that the state will be compelled to fully fund the school district, and that's what we're working towards.
So, but Diane, I don't know if you're as disturbed about this as I am, but I'm saying, Sudan, you have parents of those 30,000 parents or guardians of those 30,000 students who are trusting that these elected officials are doing the right thing by them, right? And so not only were the elected officials, even though it was not local control, they were still elected to the Board of Education, right?
Eric, sorry to interrupt you. Until 2008 or 9, the board members were appointed by the state.
That's right. I'm sorry. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
So now, so now you have the mayor, right, who's appointing them. And so you would assume...
No. Eric, the mayor is not appointing them. Until 2008 or 9, the state appointed the board directly.
Really?
So when the state came in 1989, our board was appointed by the mayor. Okay? So when the state came in 1999, they fired the entire board appointed by the mayor, and they appointed a state-appointed board to oversee the school district. In reality, they didn't have any powers. Now, in 2008, one component of local control came back to Jersey City, which was governance, which meant that you could have at that time an elected board. So across 3 years, 3 board members are elected every year to replace the state-appointed board. So one third, and then by the time I think you got to 2010 or 2011, you had a fully elected board. So the fully elected board oversaw the school district probably for about 6 to 7 years before I became president, or 5 years before I became the vice president or joined the board. However, that period also marked the largest underfunding. So you had elected board members sitting there and looking at the funding being taken away to the extent of $100 million and not responding.
And so, out to the information, was the information at the very least given out to the community to say, hey, look, here's what's going on with the school. So, your children are in these schools. Well, based on what you're saying, if the board was appointed during the time that it was appointed by the state, then those people who were appointed by the state were looking out for the best interests of the state, not the best interests of Jersey City and those 30,000 students.
Well, I know some of them. I wouldn't characterize them that way. I mean, some of them even
wait a minute.
eventually.
But I mean, I just want to look at it evidentiarily.
Sure.
If they weren't,
they didn't do anything. They sat on their hands. That's
what I'm saying. So if they sat on their hands, so if they had the information, and they know that they're sitting there on the Board of Education is to manage that board in the best way possible for the best outcomes possible for those 30,000 students. They knew that the board being underfunded was not in the best interest of those 30,000 students.
Absolutely.
And then when they did not communicate that to the public at large, and possibly create, by engaging the public in this information, creating some newsworthiness about it, they were protecting the best interest of the state.
Listen, I was not part of that history to the extent of knowing what they did at every meeting. Did they put the information out? Did not put the information out? But the fact of the matter is that when every year when the budget is overseen by the board, they do have access to the information that they are being underfunded against the formula. And that is the opportune moment when you have the budget public hearings to bring that up and present it to the public. Whether it was presented or not, I don't think it was, because parents would have been very angry to know that a very unpopular Republican governor is underfunding.
That's the point that I'm making. I know we're dragging it out.
But
the point that I'm making is that by them sitting there, having that information, by not bringing that in, look, as a board member, they could have gotten that information out to the media. They could have gotten that information out a whole bunch of different places, right? But it would not have been in the best interest of those who appointed them to be on the board.
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying? And so now they're operating against the interest by just sitting on their hands. They're operating against the best interest of those 30,000 students within the city, within Jersey City.
Listen, what they did, what information was shared with them, what guided their decision making, I don't know, because I do know that in my first few months in the board, I realized that the administration was not fully forthcoming on information to the board members.
Right.
And
here's my question for you, Sudha. How long did it take you, right? How long did it take you to realize that things were not
very quickly, Eric?
Right.
I would say
and
about
that's
6
my
months,
whole point, Sudha. So it wasn't like you had
6
to.
months.
It wasn't like you had to do years worth of digging to figure it out, right? So these people who are sitting there on the Board of Education, that information, I'm imagining, was at the ready for them, and they just didn't give a damn. I mean, literally. Go ahead.
Yeah, but Eric, to the defense of some of the board members who straddled both those timelines and who served alongside with me, they've been knocking and pounding the doors, and they didn't get the information that they wanted. Okay, and so that's why when sometimes folks refer to me as like, oh, Sudan, you were like a wartime president. You came in, you're able to fix things, and that the need of the hour was that. Maybe that's what it is. We don't know. But there are folks on the board today who served on that time, I can tell you, with all my heart that these are very experienced folks, great board members. They pounded the doors. They asked for the information, but they were not given, and they were threatened. In fact, I know 3 board members who were called to a meeting in Newark, to Trenton, where the superintendent of the commissioner of education directly threatened the board members many years ago that, hey, if you guys don't stop asking what you're asking, you guys will be out. So
right. But again, look, that those kinds of threats to me, or the fact that they were threatened and maybe they stopped asking questions or didn't push as hard says to me about those board members that they care more about their position than they did about their duty and responsibility, right? Because at the end of the day, if your responsibility is to serve the best interests of those 30,000 children, then you do that by making sacrifices, right? So Eric,
if I may just add this, some of those board members who continued on the board, they did the right thing by electing me as the vice president and the president, because a lot of those challenges were resolved when I became part of the board and I was able to work with the rest of the board through the collective leadership and experience. Now, they did the right thing when they did that, because they realized you needed strong, bold, courageous leadership to effectuate transformation. Now, I can surely tell you that some of the things that we did, like, for example, suing the state or the replacement of the superintendent, could not have happened if not for the team that we had on the board in the last 2-3 years. So you got to give them credit for acknowledging. These guys are guys who are about 20, 30 years over me. They've been educators for 40 years. They've been, a community activist for 20 years. And they recognize at that time in 17 and 18 and 19 that the times needed this kind of bold, courageous leadership and outside perspective. So they did do their job eventually, but they were not able to do the job originally because they were prevented. And also, Eric, elections have consequences. When folks don't have a majority in the board, what can you do? You can't do anything. Like, for example, in 2015, the current board president of Jersey City, Lorenzo Richardson, he tried to bring a resolution just to have a debate or a discussion on the renewal of the contract for the superintendent. The then president didn't even allow him to bring. I'm going to pause you for a second,
Sudan, but here's, I'm going to say this. And callers, please viewers, please hit the share button. I want as many people to hear and understand the battle that is taking place in Jersey City as we speak over the education and or lack thereof of black and brown children. That there is a war on their quality education. But here's what I'm going to say to you, Sudan. Yes, elections do have consequences. But if you're and I love playing what Representative Ayanna Pressley says. She says, listen, if you're afraid of being marginalized or stereotyped, don't show up. So though elections do have consequences, you're there to do a job. And the consequences ought not outweigh your willingness and desire and determination to do the job that you were elected to do. When there is an imbalance, it means that you're more concerned about your political career than you are about why you're there to serve. And this is the other piece that I'll say, and then I'll let you continue. When folks get elected, you have one or two choices. And this is what I love about this presidential election that's taking place right now. You have the people, and then you have the political elite. And where you decide to align yourself ultimately determines the level of courage you have. When you're aligned with the political elite, then you have to look at them and how they may bring the hammer down on you if you decide to go against whatever it is that they're, and those are the consequences. If you align yourself with the people by building a coalition, by actively engaging the people, then you can boldly go to execute the thing that you're going to do. And we see evidence of some of that taking place now in the House of Representatives. So when we see Ilhan Omar being attacked, she doesn't look for the political elite to protect her. She goes back to her community and she says, you guys elected me, give me the support that I need. And then they respond. When AOC is attacked, she doesn't go to the political elite. She goes back to her community. But I dare say that the elected folks and or appointed folks don't go to try to engage the community. What they do is they try to pal around for political favors with the political elite, and there lies the problem.
So currently, Susan, what is going on with the school board president, and are they moving forward to assist with this lawsuit to make sure that the funding comes back into the city of Jersey City?
Yeah, so I think we have a great president now, Lorenzo Richardson. I think some of you guys know him. He also served as the Hudson County School Board Association president, African-American man, young dad, great guy. And, of course, the thing is that board has taken a all-encompassing approach under my leadership towards resolving the funding problem, which was an all-encompassing approach that includes legal strategies, legislative strategies, operations efficiencies, elimination of waste, rationalizing HR positions and costs, and of course increasing revenues. So the board, and we've made great progress. For example, Diane, when I became president in 2018, one of the first things that hit us was we had a budget deficit of 70 million, which went up to 98 million. This is an operating deficit. I'm not talking about deficit caused by the state aid cut, but just the operating deficit. Now, in 2 years, we not only carried out a comprehensive forensic audit of the school district, which threw up its own findings, we brought about a lot of efficiencies, wherein we were able to save close to $65 million through efficiencies. And that cut the deficit from 98 million to 48 million this year. There's not one public body in New Jersey that can come and say, we cut the deficit in half. And those are the kind of path-breaking, transformative things that we were able to do initiated and started under my leadership, which continues now. Now, the crux of the problem today facing the Jersey City School Board is the adjustment aid cut that was brought about in 2018. So if you look at our budget, which is approximately $650 million, about 200 million of that 650 comes from the state in the form of a account header called adjustment aid. Now, in 2018, the state of New Jersey passed what I call as a draconian anti-constitutional law called the S2, which essentially eliminated this $200 million in adjustment aid over a period of 7 years. Now, the state also said in exchange, they would allow Jersey City to collect what is called as a business payroll tax along the lines of the payroll tax in Newark to kind of offset that $200 million cut. Now, when we went to court last year, one of the things we explained in court was, hey, this payroll tax, nobody has really costed it out. There's no real legal official presentation on how much that would collect. There's some study, some representations made that it could potentially collect $80 million. But even if it is collecting $80 million, it's nowhere close to the $200 million that is going to be cut across 7 years. And even if the law said that this payroll tax can only repatriate the exact amount of the cut every year. So the escrow amount would run out in 8 years. So at the end of 8 years, we will have no money. So that was one of the pieces of the complaint that we filed. Now we have a crisis because the second year, or actually this is the third year cut, is $86 million, whereas the mayor came out of the plan on February 14th saying he will only pay $40 million. Now, at that time, our understanding was that the state cut would be $73 million. When the budget came out on February 24th, we realized it was $86 million. So the mayor's plan not only underfunds this year by $46 million, but for the next year and the year after, he says he's only going to give $10 million and $5 million, which underfunds then by $114 million and $164 million, which means in 3 years, his plan will underfund the school district by close to $250 million, which will essentially eviscerate the school district. That's 1/3 of the budget. And so going back to the point that you made in the beginning of the thing, I'm against the mayor, no, I'm not friends. Of course I'm friends with him. I'm against this plan. This is voodoo math. It just doesn't add up. And the problem is that he's come up with this plan with zero communication or engagement with the school district. No board member, no district action, nothing. They just pull this plan out. And so that's the problem. And it's just not that. If you see the plan, I've sent it to Eric, there are 4 pieces to this plan. That's the payroll tax component, the property tax component, the efficiencies piece to it, and then there's something to do with abatements and everything else. He's proposing that the school district raise property tax by $25 million, which means that's new revenues of $25 million. But then he says you got to eliminate $25 million from your budget as a condition to that, which means that's a net zero. What's the point really? So that's why this math doesn't add up. And if you just focus on the first three aspects of it, there's a $318 million underfunding across the next 3 years, which will cost us close to 4,000 jobs. That's as many number of full-time employees we have. So if you remember what happened in Newark many years ago, that's where this plan is headed to. And obviously, I've been very vocal about this because I knew something like this would happen. And that's why on my last day as a board trustee and a board president, January 2nd, what you call as the hammer down, that was my last legal day. And at 6 o'clock on January 2nd, the new board was constituted, which means January 2nd was my last day. I was not in the country. I was outside the country. But that day, I sent an email to the mayor, a handing over email, just to make sure that we don't have this situation. And I said, Mr. Mayor, you have a $73 million cut that's coming for the school board. And by law, your payroll tax should completely repatriate that amount. I'm giving you this information so that you're prepared for it. And there are no surprises. And by the way, enclosed are the DOE workings for that so that you can be prepared. Of course, he didn't reply to my email, and he doesn't have to. But the response...
So my question to you, Sultan, if there is a friendship, and I would put air quotes around friendship, maybe you should say associate, then why is it that you have not been able to work with him, or he hasn't been able to work with you to find a budget that is adequate for the school system? Is his strings being pulled by Trenton, and he's just pulling the money out because that's what he's been told to do?
Well, so firstly, I'm not Diane, that's a false choice question because I'm not on the board. He doesn't have to work with me. I reached out to him.
I'm talking about at the time when you were on the board.
Like you said, I was very vocal. When I was on the board, we worked very well. We absolutely worked well, and we did a lot. We made a lot of strides. We are talking about what has happened in Jersey City in the last 60 days after I left the board. So when I was very clear to you at the top end of the conversation that my period of 3 years on the board represents the greatest cooperation between the municipality of Jersey City and the school board. We did a lot of things together.
But it doesn't mean it was perfect.
Sorry, it was not perfect, but we are learning. But at least we did things which didn't exist before.
Right.
I mean, the city is contributing today $5 million in shared services. Okay? We worked together on the payroll tax issue. We did a lot of things together. However, now we are talking about 2020. We're not talking about the past. We're talking about what's happening in 2020. The school board of Jersey City has to send a fully balanced budget by the third week of March to the Department of Education. And at this point, without the city certifying $86 million in payroll tax, the school board will not be able to send a fully balanced budget. Well, they can by projecting layoffs to balance that gap, and that's a problem. Right now, the mayor's position is, I'm only going to certify 40 million. Whereas by law, he has to certify 86 million. That 46 million is 680 jobs. We have 4,200 full-time employees and 2,000 part-time employees. 680 of the 4,200, that's about 15% of our headcount. Okay. And
so what is your suggestion to the public of Jersey City? What should they be doing at this particular time to make sure that he's approving the amount that he should be approving? How should he put it back?
So I can't give a suggestion to what the people have to do, but what I can say is that by law, the mayor of the city has to fully repatriate the $86 million cut. And if the mayor is, for whatever reason, if he's unable to cut, if he's not able to certify, then the mechanics that the state put into place to assuage for their S2 cut has broken down. And so then all options are on the table to question the legitimacy of S2 and the tools that the state put into place to assuage for those cuts. Because remember, the payroll tax is a creation of the state to justify or to assuage for the S2 cuts. They said, we're going to cut these amounts every year. We're going to give you a tool to fund that cut. But if that tool is not working, and it's clearly not working by the mayor's statement, then there is a absolutely plausible legal legislative path for the Jersey City School Board to question the continued legitimacy of S2.
Right, but beyond just questioning it, it almost, based on what I was reading and based on what you were saying, it's almost like Armageddon is near for Jersey City's Board of Education in terms of its underfunding, in terms of the possible layoffs of hundreds of employees, the continued underperforming schools because of the lack of funding, right? So as this is all being worked out, these children are suffering, right? This is all happening right now.
So Eric, there is, Armageddon we've been ducking this bullet for many years now. I mean, when I became the president, we had a $70 million deficit, and the district administration's response to that was to propose 450 layoffs. And we said, absolutely not. We hunkered down. We came up with alternative strategies, and we came up with efficiencies, and we balanced the budget without a single layoff. Last year, 2019, again, we had a $120 million deficit, 98 million through operations and 27 because of the state aid cut. Again, we passed the budget fully funded without a single layoff. Now, this is the third year this is happening. Now, here's the interesting part. The state of New Jersey has, every school district is capped by a 2% increase in property tax, okay? Now, Jersey City is the only district that doesn't have the 2% cap. Jersey City can go as high as they want. In fact, last year we went 5 times the 2% cap, and the 2% cap gives us 0.41% across the city. So we went 5 times that. We were able to generate 12 million. Now, our position is you can't property tax your way to fully fund a school district, because that's inequitable. Which basically what it means is you're saying that the richer the school district, the better the schools. That's why you have constitutional safeguards to ensure that however complicated and challenged the school district is, those kids will have the same access to thorough and efficient education, correct, just like the kids in a rich district, okay? Now, the state's position that, you need to fix your problem by locally increasing taxes is not constitutional. And that's the law of the land. The law of the land has clearly established that the state has to play a role in balancing that inequity. So, is it Armageddon? I don't think so, because we have created enough measures in place to, like I said, there is an all-encompassing funding strategy in place, and the board has the tools and the district has the tools to deal with the situation. I can't advocate as to what the strategy should be, but I think if you can read between the lines, I want to reiterate this. If it is clearly established that the tools that the state of New Jersey has put into place to justify or assuage their anti-constitutional funding cuts of New Jersey is clearly established it doesn't work, then everything collapses. The S2 in itself collapses on its contradictions. And that is something that the board has to put their arms around and decide if they want to pursue that. If there is a lawsuit in place already in court. And I think this constitutes an emergency, and the board has to take stock of the situation and act appropriately.
All right. So,
and in fact, if I can just add a few points on the mayor's funding plan. It talks about abatement sharing $10 million. Eric, we did an audit. There are 175 pilots in Jersey City, okay? From the year 1980 to 2016, there were 175 pilots issued. Now, we took just the top 20 pilots that constitute 60% of the billing, and we audited just those 20 abatements. And what we found out was all 20 are out of compliance going back in 3 years, which means potentially they owe the city about 60 million or 55 million in back taxes. Now, you guys had the same problem in Newark, if you remember, several years ago, and the problem was fixed. Now, these are the things that the folks should be looking at. I mean, if there is 55 or 60 million out in play there, how do we harness that money and potentially help the school district? That is not part of the mayor's plan. He basically, if you look at the plan, he says, I'm not going to touch the audit right now. That's like a pass. Okay, and that is what is concerning. Now, if you look at
what would be the strategy if potentially you have that money out there, right? If you just evaluated it and followed the plan that you just talked about, what would be the impetus for the mayor not doing that?
I don't know, but here's the problem. The mayor has put out a plan which the math doesn't add up, and that's why I call it voodoo math. But here's the most concerning part. He tells the board, if you don't follow my plan verbatim, I'm going to fire all of you, and I'm going to replace a elected board by a board that I will appoint. Now,
right.
if you look at
there lies my concern now about this whole appointed board that he wants to move to from a currently elected board, right? Yeah. So the mayor has his idea of what to do. According to what you're saying, the documents that you sent to me,
it doesn't add up.
Earlier,
his ideas
don't add up. But he wants to push forward with them with no resistance, right? And the only way to do that is Trumpian-like, right? I'm going to get rid of this elected board. I'm going to appoint all of my people, and because I've appointed them, all of them will rubber stamp whatever it is that I want to do, even if it's to the detriment of the district.
One could say that, yes.
Well, I just said it.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what is concerning for me. You come up with a plan with zero engagement with the stakeholders. You come up with a plan that mathematically doesn't add up, and then when challenged, you go into hiding. I mean, ever since we put this out, we've not heard one comment on this plan from him publicly. So in 30 days, zero. Now, of course, he can come up with a lot of explanations and say, this is what I meant this over the other. The bottom line is, this plan is dead in the water. The public has rejected it, the board has rejected it, and nobody's dealing with it. But I think it's reckless and irresponsible to put out a plan like this, which doesn't add up, but importantly, not play a active role in resolving the problem that we are faced with. The day he put out this plan, my understanding is the board president sent him an email saying, hey, we need you to certify 86 million or 73 million. He's not replied to anybody. Essentially, he's gone into hiding. Okay, and that's the problem. Which is fine. Constitutionally, it's for the board to work out this problem and to balance the budget. You put yourself into this whole situation by coming up with a plan that doesn't add up. So either you follow through or you course. It's okay for people to make mistakes. Let me make this absolutely clear. I believe that the mayor means well. Okay, and that's why he proactively came with a plan. You start with that presumption, right? Now, when it has been obviously pointed out that these numbers don't add up, then you course correct and say, okay, you know what, guys, I didn't know this, or let's revise this and figure something out. For example, if you look at his plan, he says you guys should do a health benefits audit. It will save you guys $5 million. We moved from the state health insurance plan to a privately self-funded plan, did a comprehensive audit. We saved $30 million for the school district in the last 2 years. Clearly, he doesn't know. That's why he's proposing this. Okay, and that is the proof of the whole thing. Then he says we should sell the property in Claremont for $5 million. Nobody's going to sell anything to him. So this is having been pointed out the glaring issues and errors in his plan. The right thing for him to have done would have been to re-engage with the board and say, you know what, fine, mea culpa, we made a mistake. Let's sit down and figure out how we can do it. But he's gone into hiding, which is fine. That he has his priorities, and that's totally fine. The board has a constitutional obligation to balance the budget, and I have full confidence, in the board to be able to carry out their responsibilities, which are elected by the people. Like, for example, Eric, you have a board member on that board who received 26,000 votes, Eric, to become a board member a year ago, November of 2018. Just imagine, she got 26,000 votes to become a board member. You're going to go and fire that person? That's a slap on the face of 26,000 citizens of Jersey City who voted for that person.
Yeah. Well, listen, what we're going to do is I'm going to take a quick commercial break. I'm going to allow folks to digest the information that we've been given out so far. And when we get back, we'll continue this. Sudan, thanks for hanging in there. Diane, we'll be right back.
Thanks, Eric.
Do you have loss prevention or safety concerns? Black Belt Security and Investigations has armed and unarmed guards that can protect what is important to you. For security you can count on, visit www.bbsillc.com or call 1-800-493-1859 today.
BBSI. BBSILLC.com.
All right, hey Sudan, man, I am exhausted from this.
Hi.
Yep, I'm exhausted listening to. I mean, it is a battle that's going on over there in Jersey City, and for the time, and I guess as I listen to the timeline of this thing, how many thousands or tens of thousands of children have been impacted?
Yeah, and see, that's a great point, Eric. Now look at this, okay? We are graduating out approximately on an average, God bless you, we are approximately graduating out about 1,300 kids every year, okay? Now, bulk of those kids are coming, bless you again, bulk of those kids are coming from our 4 major high schools, Ferris, Lincoln, Dickinson, and Snyder. These are the 4 major high schools. So if we are graduating out 1,300 students, one would argue that, one could say that about 800 to 900 are coming out from these 4 high schools. Then we have like McNair, which is like, a very high performing, probably one of the best schools in New Jersey, magnet schools, and we have Infinity. So that is probably about 400 kids. So if you look at it, the bulk, 900 of the 1,300 we're graduating out every year, they're coming from our major high schools. And if you look at the scores of the major high schools, they average about 5 to 15 in English and math out of our 100. Okay? And predominantly these are black and brown kids. So if you look at it from the last 10 years and going exactly in line with what you said, what has been the impact of this 1.1 billion plus another 1.5 billion of underfunding on Jersey City? We probably lost 2 generations because of this.
And wait, let us be clear. This is intentional. This is intentional. This wasn't by accident. There were people who intentionally did this.
Eric, I don't know about whether it is intentional or it is a result of the lack of,
wait a minute. How could it not be intentional? Because what you're saying, but I want to be clear.
I want to focus on this.
So I know, listen, I am less politically correct than most people. And so what I'm going to say is this. You talked about how the more affluent schools were getting the funding, right?
Well, the buildings were replaced. Like, for example,
they were getting attention. Yeah. So let's not say fun. They were
absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. They were showing them the love. The love was not being spread in the schools where people who look like me are.
Or me, for that matter. Or you,
right? and so that's intentional. Right, that we're looking and they're making a choice that they're gonna embrace and love those students, and they're gonna deny and ignore these students. That's intentional.
The thing is, we can only go with the parameters and metrics we have. Okay, and the thing is, in one of the meetings when I was the president in 2018, I then asked the administration, "Hey, every year." You take me to these graduation ceremonies. We speak as a board president. I address the parents, the families, the kids, and it's a great party and it's a great feeling of satisfaction. So now we are in November. The graduation took place in June. I said, we put out 1,300 kids. Do you have a mechanism of knowing where these kids are right now? Did they land up in college? Did they land up in a job? Or are they doing some kind of a community-related thing? Like, did they enlist in the army or they're doing Peace Corps? And the response was, no, we don't track. I said, listen, my cousin owns a tire store. When he sells a tire, he knows how many times the tire pops and which store it was sold in and which car it's sitting in. We're sending out 1,300 kids, which represent the future of this nation, and you don't know where they are. That's a problem. Okay, so does the district have the tools to be able to do it? Maybe not. Maybe they don't have the tools. And so we have to make sure that we have access to the data and the tools to be able to track that. Now, the kids who have access to resources and money and multiple computers at home, they're going to do well, Eric. You don't need to track them. You know that they're going to land up in Harvard. They're going to land up in a law firm in Manhattan. They're going to probably be a doctor in a hospital or something like that. But it's the kids that look like you and me, the black and brown kids who live on the south side of the city. Who's the competition? The corner boy who's wearing those cool pumps and possibly having a flashy car. That's the competition. So the kid is looking at that. What's the aspiration? Do I want to be that, or do I go through these underfunded schools which offer no path forward? And that's why we had these problems. Eric, I come from a large family. Between the time July 2016 that I said I'm going to run through the end of my presidential term, my board term, I attended the funerals of 15 kids. Okay? I haven't seen a dead child before that in my life. Okay? 2018, back-to-back, September, October, November, December, 4 kids shot and killed on the streets of Jersey City. Teenage kids. Okay, and no fault of this. They were just walking in a group, or they were just standing there. They were somebody's friend, somebody's enemy, who knows what. Okay, now that is snuffing out of black and brown kids crudely, cruelly, in cold blood on the streets. Now, if you had a fully funded school with proper mechanics to guide these kids to have a future, they probably wouldn't have been hanging out on the street, getting a bullet and dying. Okay, and that's why I say we lost 2 generations on account of this underfunding. 2 generations of kids were lost. And eventually, when the courts rule in our favor, which I'm confident and hopeful of, you take that money. How do you make good for what has happened?
How do you repair? Right. So how do you
make good for this?
How do you repair it?
Yeah, if you have a child from Lincoln High School sitting and rotting in jail because he didn't have an opportunity or she didn't have an opportunity, what do you do to roll the clock back?
And again, so be clear, because I'm saying this is criminal. I'm saying that it is intentionally done. I'm saying that much like redlining or any other policy that was put in place to subjugate one group of people while elevating another group of people, right? Knowing good and well what the consequences and the benefits would be by those actions, that you have people who have taken part in that here in the state of New Jersey. And so these 2 generations that have been lost, it was not by mistake. Look, and like I say to all of the viewers and listeners to the show, the hat that I wear it because I want people to be clear that I am on code and I'm focused and I know who I am. And I know how they see us. And they see us as the commodity to their wealth and to their power. And so to the degree that they could put in place policies that keep us going to jail, right, and sleeping in those cots that cost $300,000 a year, they're going to do that. As long as they can continue to track us in from the school to prison through this pipeline, they're going to continue to do it. And part of the way that they do it is by underfunding, right? By creating these insurmountable odds, and then the results are what they are. But they already know what they're going to be. That's my whole point. That these people who sit there, Sudan, they know what the outcomes are going to be. Then they track them from the 3rd grade on based on how they underperform. And then they say there's a greater likelihood based on this underperformance that this child is going to wind up in prison. And they do that in black and brown communities, and then they build these jails. And then they just wait.
No. Well, it's a vicious circle, there's no doubt about it.
Yes.
And somebody has to break that cycle. And one of the things I think we did as a board in suing the state draws attention to that, to that problem. You're asking questions, and I got to be honest with you, some of the questions that you have brought about today, I haven't even, it didn't even cross my mind, because I was focused on the subject at hand, which is the school is being underfunded. We need a fully funded budget. We need to give the kids the resources. But
but what I'm saying to you is this. See, so when you say it like that the school is underfunded, it's as though, there was just somebody just made a mistake. And I'm saying to you that is more insidious than that.
Oh, it goes beyond that. Yeah, it's a socio-economic impact of monumental proportions. I've always known that we lost 2 generations of kids because of this. But we got to stem the tide at some point. We can't just pretend this problem can go on, because the kids who are coming from affluent families, they're going to have access to opportunity. They're going to have access to resources. Look at the coronavirus thing. If indeed, God forbid, we go into a situation where schools shut down, which I hope we don't have to, and if there's a long-distance learning protocol that kicks into place, it's again the black and brown kids who are going to struggle. They don't have internet at homes. They're probably living with their grandmothers, or they're living with their grandfathers, or they're living in a broken home, or they're living in a home with no access to the internet, single-family households. These kids are the kids with the highest risk. I mean, if you look at the 33,000 kids in Jersey City, 21,000 of them, Eric, 21,000 of those 33,000 kids qualify for the free or reduced lunch program. 4,500 of those kids are special needs kids, of which 800 are autistic. 12,000 of those kids, they don't speak English at home. English is not the primary language in their homes. 17,000 of those kids are categorized as high risk. Now you roll the dice and you look at another piece of statistics, the demographics of these kids. 17% or 16% are classified as white, 22% African American, 40% Hispanic, the remaining 20% South Asian. Now, in that 17% white, that number is slightly overstated because a lot of the Middle Eastern folks classify themselves as white. So if you took about, there are 30,000 Middle Eastern folks in Jersey City. So if you account for those households, which is about 3,000 households in the school district, probably about 5% of the white are not, the traditional Caucasian white you're talking about. So you're talking about 10%. And if you look at the spread in the 33,000, that's exactly the number in terms of households. So you'll have about 7,000 to 8,000 kids with full complements, multiple computers, internet, and all of that stuff. And the remaining kids, they're going to be, they're going to be cut out of the process. And if you talk to some of the teachers, and if you talk to some of the old folks who retired teachers, they will tell you, oh, you know what, this is all a plan. I mean, I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories, but I'm just telling you, they will say, this has all been a plan because they want to fire all the teachers and they want to bring Google Classroom and they want to do this. So what do you do? What answer do you have for those guys?
You need to look. So here's the deal. And again, I mean, I'm just trying to keep it real simple for the listener and for the viewer of the show. We do not have a government that protects us. And I'm talking about black people in particular.
I agree completely.
We do not have a government that protects us. And, they are there to protect the interests of corporations. They're there to protect the interest of the political party. But they're not there to protect our interests. There's no way that all of this could be going on, and you see the effects of it every single day. But here's where my concern is, Sudan. Outside of what the elected officials ought to do, there are people who elect them. So these voters, are to blame as well, right? Because they're the ones who put them there. So we can shine a light on the appointed and or elected official,
sure.
But we also have to look at the community and say the community, because of their psychoses, has tolerated this.
Yeah, but Eric, if you look at Jersey City, it's a highly engaged, city. Like when I won the elections in 2016, there were 18,073 citizens of Jersey City who voted for me. Along with that comes a huge responsibility. And then you're constantly engaged with people saying, "Hey, what are you doing for my kids?" For example, I lived.
But wait a minute. How do you square that? So I understand that they come out and vote, right?
Yeah.
But when I say that they're engaged, I'm saying beyond voting. I'm saying that you vote and then you hold accountable. Right?
Well, they do. For example, in our meetings, I don't know if you see. So one of the things I did when I became president was I opened up the meetings through social media. So all of our school board meetings are broadcast live on Facebook ever since I became president, which was January of 2018. Also, our school district had this strange rule that if you wanted to speak, you had to register 24 hours and before at 4 p.m. And if you didn't register, you couldn't speak. I just got rid of that policy and said, no, anybody who wants to speak can come and speak. If you didn't register, you can come and give your name and just, speak. All of that allowed people to feel more welcome. It gave them more opportunity to engage. They saw the meetings sitting at home. They saw the issues. And so on certain nights, we had 30,000 citizens watching the meeting live. And so a lot of things, for example, you saw the Muslim families coming and fight for halal food in the school district. And we were the first school district in New Jersey to offer halal as an option across the city. And so a lot of outcomes were influenced by engagement of parents and the community coming and asking and fighting for those things. Because of the perception that the board may not have the courage to increase the school tax levy, which has an impact on the property tax, there are a lot of activists, a lot of parents who came and fought for it last year. And we broke through that ceiling and went 5 times the traditional numbers to get about a level that would, help fund or balance the budget last year. So we've done a lot of things like this because of the engagement of parents. However, you're right. If you have 20,000 households, on an average, you have on a great night, you'll have about 200, 250, 300 parents in a meeting. Now, where are the rest of the 90,000? So you're right. Okay, but we do get emails, we get text messages, we get phone calls, we have comments on the Facebook live feed that we react to. Okay, so there are a lot of policies. Like, for example, parents came and said, hey, we come from a culture, and students came from a culture saying, hey, we come from an African culture where the headdress for the girls is part of who we are. And you have a policy that prevents anybody from wearing anything on their head in school. So we brought a policy saying, no, in recognition of that culture, the African culture where headdress is important for women and girls, we will allow girls to wear headdress, and for staff, and you're not going to be found,
so I get I get the headdress, I get the cultural stuff, I get the halal food, I get all of that stuff, and I think that all those things are important. So I'm not trying to minimize.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is this: that if we're saying that 2 generations have been lost because of underfunding, and we see, the results of it through lack of employment or underemployment. We see it through mass incarceration. We see it through violence on the streets. The drug trade. We see all of this because they don't have access to choices.
Opportunity.
My question is this: where is the involvement? Like you said, 30,000 people were engaged in watching it on Facebook Live. Folks showed up from the Islamic community because they wanted halal food. But where's the community at large? The black community, and then the black and brown community, and then the entire community. See, that's how I order it because I'm foundational black.
So
said,
Eric, it's interesting you bring this. Let me tell you something. For many years, they had the school board meetings in a faraway part of the city where the black and brown folks couldn't come and have access to the meetings. So one of the first things I did when I became president was I changed the venue of the board meeting and took it to the heart of the south side of the city. And you know what's the pushback I got from some of the folks? They were like, oh, it's too unsafe for us to have the meeting there. I said, no, if our kids are coming here every day to school, then it's safe enough for us to have our meetings. And if it's not safe for us, then it's not safe for our kids. And so we moved the meetings to the south side of the city. And that definitely enhanced the engagement and participation of black and brown parents. In addition, some of us on the board, at least speaking for myself and Lorenzo, we would go to a lot of the parent-teacher meetings, and we would. I'll give you an example. I would go pretty much to all the parent-teacher meetings, but I would go and sit in a corner, not identify myself with my son, and just hang out and listen to what I was saying. And Eric, let me tell you this, and I know you will say this is not a substantive issue, but in the first 6 months, I tabulated what the concerns of the parents were, and particularly on the south side of the city. And you know what I found out was 80% of the parents were talking at a PTA meeting. Can you guess what they spoke about? 80% of the parents spoke about this one issue, which was 80% of the times. Can you take a venture a guess what the issue was?
What?
It was the poor quality of the food. So I'm sitting there and thinking to myself, how come these guys are not talking about prison pipeline and curriculum, and why are they talking about food? It took me a while it dawned on me slowly that the food that we provide in the schools for these kids, the breakfast and lunch and dinner, that's the access for these kids to quality, nutritious food. And this was really a primal fight that some of the parents were having. And as a result of that, we did a complete change in the food procurement policy, and we got rid of the food vendor that was providing food for us for over 30 years, and got in a different company through an RFQ process, which, by the way, the previous food vendor challenged in court, saying he needs to continue to have the contract. The judge ordered in our favor, and to some extent that issue has been mitigated. So parents do have different settings, Eric, but here's the thing. If I'm a dad and I'm working 2 jobs and the only clothes I have is the uniform that I wear to work, and my Sunday clothes are my Giants jersey, I may feel uncomfortable coming to a school board meeting and speaking. Maybe I can't be articulate in my communication. Maybe I feel shy that I don't have the clothes. Maybe I don't have the money for bus fare to get to the meeting. So while yes, you have a point in saying parents have to get engaged, there are a lot of inherent conditions that are preventing the engagement of the parent. And that's why the board members who are elected, they should not just work within the vacuum of the meeting. They have to go beyond that to be able to channelize the aspirations of the common folks, the aspirations of the black and brown folks.
But that is the point that I'm making, right, Siddhan? That if you have if it's imbalanced in terms of why you're there, So
Yeah.
if you're there to be a part of the political clique, if you're there because you look at it as a stepping stone in your political career, right? And so the
Yeah.
decisions that you make are first and foremost to protect you as opposed to advocate for the community, then you're going to have some of the problems that you have. Because folks are not going to take risks. Politicians are not going to take risks. If, however, you're there to advocate for the community, then you're going to engage the community because you know you need the support of the community in order to effectuate change. So when I don't see that level of engagement, and then it manifests itself in shifting policy in a way that drives the mayor, right, who, according to you, is operating with voodoo economics, right, because he doesn't feel any level of political retribution from the community. Right? So he doesn't feel, so whatever he's doing, the way that he's going about doing it, he doesn't feel that there's going to be any retribution when election day comes, that there's going to be this major pushback from the community that's going to kick him out of office. Otherwise, he wouldn't be proceeding the way that he is. I don't know if you're still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello. Your call back. So my thing is, let's see if I can get you back. Hold on. Got a little technical difficulty. I think I have Diane on, and I think I have Sudan on. So go ahead, Sudan.
Yeah. So Eric, I heard everything that you said. So the good news is that the mayor, when confronted with the voodoo math of his policies, I think, has backed out and is not forcing and pushing this plan anymore. At least we've not heard him or his surrogates pushing this plan in the last 4 weeks. That's good news. The only request I made, if you see at the bottom of my letter, is we have a newly elected board. There are at least 4 board members in that board, who are either elected in November or are new board members who were appointed last year, and so they're fairly new to the system. But for the first time in the history of Jersey City, we have an African American board president and an African American superintendent.
Right.
Give them the space to do their job.
But let me ask you a question,
space.
Sudan. So when you say that he is not because I've been an insider in politics for a long time, right?
Sure.
So if he's not pushing it, there's a couple of things, right? Maybe he's not pushing it because he wants to keep it below the radar until such time that he can manipulate the board to get the people that he wants supporting it.
Sure.
Right? Otherwise, he'd throw it in the garbage and he'd push another plan. But he's not pushing any plan right now. He's just quiet. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But Eric, here's the thing. It doesn't matter because D-Day is very close by. In about 2 weeks, the board has to send a fully balanced budget. The board's ability to send a fully balanced budget to the DOE is incumbent on the mayor revising his position.
Oh no, I know, I understand what you're saying.
For 86 million.
No,
if he doesn't send a letter for 86 million, we are screwed.
But I understand what you're saying. But if he were to continue to publicly push this plan right now, right?
Yeah.
You might have an uprising in the community based on all the information that we're laying out.
I think there is already an uprising because people they're really, really disenchanted with his move to replace the elected board with the appointed board. They're very upset about the fact that he's coming across as trying to protect the builders and the developers and not taking them or making them accountable for the out of compliance $50 million that they owe the city. There's a lot of disenchantment at that point. But see, I want to keep my focus on the school board and the school board only, and to ensure that the school budget is fully funded. And there's one thing and one thing only that he has to do this year, and that is to certify $86 million. And if he certifies $86 million payroll tax for the school board, then then the problem to a large extent is, if you're past the
Do you think
danger
he's going to
zone.
do it?
Sorry?
Do you think he's going to do it? I lost the call. We'll get it back. My question was, do you think he's going to do it?
So, Eric, it's binary. He has to do it by law. And if he doesn't do it, then what it means is that the whole S2 mechanics has broken down. So it's very binary. It's not about will he do it or won't he do it. He does it. If he doesn't do it, which is mandated by law, it essentially signifies clearly that the S2 law and the mechanics that the state put together to fund the S2 cuts has broken down.
No, so I understand that.
Yeah,
so what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to get to is this, because I don't want any surprises, right?
Yeah.
So if you're saying,
I don't know. The answer to that is I don't know.
Right. So it is not.
And I hope he does the right thing.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So it's not binary.
Yeah.
There's a variable in there, right?
Sure. Possibly. Yeah. One could argue. Yeah.
So one can argue that there's a variable in there.
Yeah.
And that he may do the unthinkable. Right. And what I'm suggesting to you is this: that the people he's most beholden to are those developers, right? And so if it came between the people and the developers, I'm going to say based on historic voting or apathy, he's going to lean toward the developers, and we're going to have another generation or two of black and brown people suffering.
Well, Eric,
and that's
like
why I
said,
asked if Armageddon was upon us. And
Eric,
this. You're talking about the fact that we have a black superintendent there, and we have a black president of the Board of Education there. My question to you, with the platform that both of them have, why aren't they speaking out in a much louder?
They are doing their job really well. They are fighting. Superintendent Walker is leading from the front. At the last board meeting, he made very clear his intention, his feeling. Board President Lorenzo Richardson has been very aggressive. He sent out an open letter to the mayor. They're doing their job. The point that I've been trying to raise is that the mayor should let them do their job and not second guess them and not threaten them at every juncture. I think he needs to give them the space to do their job. I mean, Superintendent Walker and President Richardson, and for that matter, the rest of the board members, for the most part, they are committed, and you can see their actions. I mean, they've had listening meetings in the last few weeks, eliciting public comment on what the public wants to see in the budget. But the thing is, it's like this. My father always used to say, it reminds him of a doctor or surgeon who once told him, the surgery was an amazing success. It was 8 hours long. It was a perfect success, but the patient died. It's like that. None of this matters if you don't have a fully funded budget. Right. And that key is in the hands of the mayor. Okay, and the problem is because he has said he will only fund 40 million off that cut, knowing that I've given him a letter saying the cut is 73 million. Now the problem is exasperated because the state came and said it's not 73 million, it's 86 million. So if he certifies the budget or the payroll tax 86 million, for now, we've kicked the can down the road. For now, we live to fight another day. And that's the responsible thing for him to do. And I hope he does that. And Eric, to his credit, because I'm also, this will also assuage your colleague Diane there about me being against him. No, I'm not. The same mayor that people accuse of being too cozy with the developers, he's the one who took the lead and passed the payroll tax 18 months ago when the developers threatened him to not do it. And when the developers sued the city, he is fighting back on that to make sure that the payroll tax is in place. However, the same developers who are being sued, they also funded, they sunk close to $1 million in the last year's school board election. And I was one of the victims of that $1 million. However, they've also, I know, have promised to spend $2 million in the city council election next year. So how much the fact that they spent $1 million in the last year's school board election and how much the threat to spend $2 million in the next city council election, which is next year when the mayor is up for re-election, how much all of that influences his decision? These are new changed circumstances. So I don't know how much those will influence his decision making. I can't second guess. The only thing I can tell you is the history or the past that I was part of where he stood up to the developers, okay? And he stood up to the challenge, and there were his own council members tried to prevent the payroll tax from being implemented. But he stood up to that challenge. And when they sued him, he fought that. Right now, we won that first round, but now it's in appellate court. Now, I don't know in the changed circumstances what will happen. Okay, like, will they not defend it? Will they let it die? I don't know. Because there's a good possibility that the judge in the appellate court might split the baby. He might say, yes, the payroll tax is constitutional. However, the fact that Jersey City is collecting the payroll tax from non-citizens of Jersey City who are not really part of the school system, that piece is unconstitutional. So therefore, Jersey City collect the payroll tax from the citizens of Jersey City. If that kind of a ruling comes, the city may just let it die. And maybe that's the reason why he's doing this. The fact that he's saying he'll only give 10 million next year and the 5 million the following year, that may be in anticipation of such a ruling. I don't know, So those are all the different pieces that are in play here.
All right. Well, listen, folks, let's, I say, hope for the best, brace for the worst. Brace for the worst. So listen, Sudan, I'm sure you've been watching the presidential election, right?
Yeah.
So there was a massive shift.
Yeah.
A massive shift come Super Tuesday, right? You had almost every pundit saying that Bernie Sanders was going to wipe the floor with Biden, that the Democratic Party was going to take this thing to the convention floor. They were going to implode the Democratic Party in an attempt to snatch what would have then been the will of the people from Bernie Sanders and to anoint Joe Biden. And then came Fish Fry Clyburn in South Carolina endorsing Biden, giving him momentum. He won a lot of states that they didn't think he was going to win. And now you have polls that are saying that Joe Biden is going to mop the floor with Bernie Sanders tomorrow. What are your thoughts?
So here's the thing. I was a very strong Clinton supporter in 2016, okay? And I was definitely not, in support of Bernie at the time. Now, cut to 2020, when you see all this, what Trump has done to our nation and has literally, through actions of commission and omission, moved the country so far right that you can't even recognize the fabric of the nation anymore. I thought to myself that one presidency term of Bernie, who is really extreme left, will help somewhat calibrate or correct the system. Okay? Having said that, I have deep respect and love for Biden because, he was the vice president under Obama, who's, I think, one of the greatest presidents our nation has ever seen. But having said that, let's just focus on what happened here. I think the moderate or the centrist Democratic vote was split between a bunch of candidates, and the Democratic Party wised up to it and said, hey, we're not going to allow Bernie to come in from the outside and do a hostile takeover of the party, just like Trump did a hostile takeover of the party from the outside. They saw the Romney nomination of 2012 pattern, and they saw the Trump nomination pattern of 2016. Both nominees, not the primary choices, if left to themselves, to the Republican Party. Okay, the Republican Party would have wanted to appoint Jeb Bush in 2012, and the Republican Party would have probably wanted to, put Jeb Bush or Ted Cruz in 2016. Now, I think the Democratic Party wised up to it. I think there was a serious conversation with Warren, with the former mayor from Bend, and also the senator. Yeah. And I think some of them agreed to play, ball, whereas Warren said, absolutely no way, I'm not going to do it. So I think a result of that is what I think we saw.
Let me ask you a question. So, but what you're describing, see, and I try to take it out of the realm, and I'm actually, as we're talking, there's somebody in the thread having a conversation with me about this. I'm taking it out of the realm now of being about Biden and Bernie Sanders, right? And saying, they're people involved in this, right? So on one side, and this is how I see it, and correct me or offer your perspective, but on one side, you have a movement of people who are saying, given the current construct, the current makeup of our system, it has led to an enormous homeless rate, an enormous poverty rate, an enormous racial wealth gap, an enormous income gap, an enormous racial education gap. Has led to all these things. Millions and millions of people who can't afford medicine, millions and millions of people who don't have health care. It's led to that. Meanwhile, it has enriched a very, very small percentage, this 1%. And they're saying we need to have a fix for this, and only through radical change can we have that.
I subscribe to that. I mean, healthcare for all,
right?
College,
and so now,
the free college, no tuition for college. These are all things that will actually put the country back on a map.
Here's the question I was getting to. Mm-hmm. So when you had this alignment within the party, they weren't just aligning against Bernie Sanders; they were aligning against these millions and millions of people.
Yeah, well, yes, you could say that, because as crazy as people want to paint Bernie, a lot of the ideas that he's saying, he didn't pull out of thin air. These are time-tested ideas in the civilized world, in the modern civilized world. If you go across the border north in Canada or a lot of Western European nations, this is the modus operandi. So we have, unfortunately, we have failed. We lag behind the civilized world when it comes to healthcare. We lag behind college and career training when it comes to the civilized world. So he's coming up with ideas and plans. Really, they're not inventions of his own. These are time-tested plans that are working, not just in Western democracies, but even sometimes what you would call as third world nations, for instance. Okay, I mean, countries like India, have healthcare for all, kind of a program to a large extent. So the point is that I think where Bernie failed is in three things. One, I think he got too confident and he didn't really do a great campaigning work like in states like Massachusetts and Texas and stuff like that, which he was leading at one point. I think that's a function of elections. The other thing is Bernie did fail in coming up with strong solutions as to how to cost or fund some of his ideas, which if you look at his website, he has plans, but when asked on 60 Minutes, he said, I don't know, it was a dumb move. And the third thing is, when you're running for the Democratic Party nomination, there is absolutely no need to antagonize the Democratic Party and, start a war with them by saying, I'm running against the Republicans and the Democrats. Well, if that's the case, run as an independent. So repeatedly beating the Democrats on their head, I think it had a toll, because I think if none of those three things happen, he might right now be the presumptive nominee. But if you could have done, even if it's back channel, to build a coalition with the establishment and say, hey, we'll work it out. You pick a guy, put him as a vice president so that we can build a coalition. The goal is to beat Trump. I got 10 to 12 million guys who are going to sit it out if I'm not the nominee, but I can win just on the basis of 10 to 12 million. Trump is probably going to get 60 million, 65 million votes. If my 10 to 12 guys sit it out, your guy is going to get only 58, 59. Best case 60, he's going to lose. If I bring my 10 million, I'm going to be the next president. You can't do it without me. I can't do it without your core base of 55 million. So let's go together.
I fear that your logic is based on the Democratic Party wanting to, in an honorable way, negotiate. What I've always suggested was this, that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are two wings of a dirty, ugly bird.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, to that extent, the Democratic Party, I believe, would rather have 4 more years of Donald Trump than to acquiesce to a Bernie Sanders that would blow it all up. And so, if you for a minute think from that perspective, there is no negotiating.
Yeah, but, listen, we always hope for the best, right? We want to be eternal optimists. That's what, we are as humans. So I want to believe that the Democratic Party that I, have always been a part of will say, you know what, if we have to deal with negotiation and put our arms around Bernie as a nominee, I would do that to prevent Trump. I want to believe that. Now, yes, there are some guys who might...
Wait. Yeah. But this is the same Democratic Party locally, right, in New Jersey, that threw Barbara Buono under the bus. Remember that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes,
This is the same.
All of them.
Come on.
All of them endorsed Chris Christie.
And endorsed Chris Christie. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's that. See, so for me, I know the history of the Democratic Party. They protect their own interests. It's a group.
Eric, let me put it. Eric, can I give you my thought on this? I don't think a lot of the folks who are Democrats in New Jersey are actually Democrats.
I agree.
They claim to be Democrats, but they know that there's no way for them to run and win an election in, say, for example, Hudson County if they call themselves Republicans. Okay? And I always said this for many, many years. A lot of these folks are not Democrats. Okay? They put out these shiny disco ball things to make it look like they're progressive Democrats, but deep in their heart, they're actually very conservative Republicans. They don't stand a shot to win the election if they call themselves a Republican. Look at the lack of the open primary system. You don't have an open primary system in New Jersey. I mean, the nominees for the Democratic Party, the so-called line, is put together by, there's no longer smoke-filled cigar rooms, but by the party establishment. So this is not really a direct democracy. You should let folks fight it out in an open primary, and then whoever wins the primary, let the party and the citizens of this state coalesce behind that based on party affiliation. But you don't have that. Every June, you have the Democratic Party deciding who the nominees are, and anybody who challenges it is, demonized. And that's not true democracy, if you ask me.
I have somebody continues to try to call. Caller, please try to call back. I'll see if I can answer the call. I'm not sure why it shows a missed call. Call back again. I'll see if I can get you in on this conversation. So where do you think we're going to go? Do you think Bernie Sanders says that he's optimistic that given the bad trade deal that Biden participated in while he was vice president and pushed for, that it had a profound impact on those people in Michigan. And he believes that he has a ground game and he'll be able to convince those folks in Michigan to vote for him.
Eric, if one thing I've learned from my my public life is it's never over until it's really over. And each election, each day, when we live in a 24/7 news cycle, it throws up different things and it can influence outcomes. I mean, at this point, I think 600 delegates have been decided of, I think, 4,000 or so.
Right.
So I think we got some way to go. We have some, I would say, saturation or normalization early on, where you have now head-to-head. Let these guys present their contrast their ideas and see where it goes from here. I don't think there's a presumptuous nominee at this point of time. I don't think either. I think both guys have the ability to end up on top. They may not have a plurality, but they may I think Sanders could end up on top of Biden, or the other way around. I mean, California delegates have not come in full. It may take 2 weeks for that number to come. And if you froze the Super Tuesday numbers with the final tally, you might see that Sanders ended up on Super Tuesday night with more delegates than Biden. I don't know.
Now, let me ask you another question. What do you think? Because Kamala Harris endorsed Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
I just got a breaking news that Cory Booker just endorsed Bernie Sanders. I'm sorry, Joe Biden. They both endorsed Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Now, these were the only two black candidates that were on the stage.
Yeah.
Right? And both of these candidates went after Joe Biden and his history of cooperating with segregationists.
Sure.
Right? They went after them. Both of them presented themselves as black candidates who were there supposedly to support the black community. But when challenged about what they were going to specifically do for black people, both of them fell short. Right? Kamala Harris then attacked Joe Biden for his position on busing, right? And then she came out with that famous line and said, "That black girl, that was me." And then went and had these shirts made up for her campaign and did all of that. Now, both of these black candidates, or former candidates, are now endorsing the guy that they raked over the coals. How's the black community supposed to look at that? Because on one hand, you seem to be standing up and saying, hey, listen, we need the black community to understand that this guy isn't the guy you should be voting for because of his positions, his past history.
Yeah.
Now they're saying ignore his past history, ignore his position on being the author of the crime bill, ignore his position on busing, ignore his position on cozying up with segregationists. You should put all of that aside, not ask for any specific tangibles, black folks. You should just go ahead and vote for him because we said so.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about Senator Harris. I mean, I have a lot of respect for what she has achieved as a woman of mixed racial heritage. I'm a interracial person myself. I draw from 4 different ethnic backgrounds, and Senator Harris is similar background, and I've tracked her progress with a lot of interest over the years. Unfortunately, that tracking also threw up a lot of concerns. Her record, on her criminal justice, and the disposition towards that. And I'm not really comfortable if I can say today that if she's part of the ticket, if that gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling.
Right.
So it's easy to stand on the stage and throw darts at somebody, but when you don't have a proper record in today's world, whereas you're hitting the guy for what he did 30 years ago, people evolve, people change. We all had different positions on different things, socially or financially, and over the years we've changed. There are things that we have evolved, we've learned new things, and we've embraced those things. So I mean, to beat somebody down to death on something that they did 30 years ago, when hence they have shown a departure from that position, it's I don't completely subscribe to that. Okay, I'm not talking about something that they did in criminally, like somebody did something like to a person or to 30 years ago. It doesn't take away the crime aspect of it. However, if they had a position and they have hence shown that they have evolved on that, and they have actually fought to safeguard the same folks that they thought were on the receiving end.
But here's the challenge with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 1952, Martin Luther King, who all of the Democrats celebrate Dr. King, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King's birthday, they're all at a church somewhere.
Sure.
They make their way down to Selma. They stand on the bridge and take the picture, right? They do all of that. But Dr. King in 1952 declared himself a social democrat, a democratic socialist. In 1952, Dr. King was deeply concerned about 40 million poor people in America, right?
Yeah.
Dr. King was murdered because he pushed for a poor people's campaign. So now, when you look at what somebody did 30 years ago, and you look at what they're doing now, one thing that we know for sure is that black people that Dr. King and poor people that Dr. King fought for are worse off now than they were when he was fighting for them.
I agree. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying to you is this: even if we look at the timeline and we say, well, 30 years ago, this person had this position, what we do know is that they haven't advocated for the advancement of us, or if they did, they failed. Right? So that's binary. Either if they say they advocated, we say, well, you've been in the Senate, you've been in the Congress, you've been there for this amount of time, and we're doing worse off. So you failed.
Sure.
So why should you be given?
That's a good argument. Okay, I get that. Okay, now let's switching gears to Bernie. In support of his campaign, I think Bernie has to ensure that there's a ground game that turns up the voters.
And understand,
okay?
and because I want to make this clear.
The young people didn't turn up in Texas.
But I want
to
make this clear.
Yeah.
To me, it's not about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a vehicle.
Yeah.
For me, it is about the continuation of the poor people's campaign.
But Eric, right now, Bernie Sanders is the personification of that concept. And so his losing of the nomination will mean that America is rejecting those ideas. That's the danger in all of this. Okay? So that is why it's a function of elections. He failed the people by getting cocky and confident and not turning out the people in Massachusetts and Texas and all these states on Super Tuesday because he thought he was winning. Now, some people say they did a coup d'etat and all these guys withdrew over the weekend. I don't think that was enough over the weekend to influence the election outcome on Tuesday. You're talking about 24, 48, 60 hours, whereas 50% of the people voted in advance. So I think he needs to focus on the nomination. He needs to turn out the folks. He needs to convince people that he has an actual plan that will work on how to fund these plans, because if not, it's just empty promises, right? I think he's a stand-up guy. I think he means well. I think his plans are great for America. But the danger, Eric, is that if he loses, then it's the end of democratic socialism in the United States for the next 4 years. It also means that people will parse it as those ideas have been rejected by the nation, which means millions will continue to be without health insurance. Millions will continue to be saddled with college debt. Homelessness will continue to grow, and the middle class won't have a shot, and it'll continue to collapse, and we'll just have rich and poor. And America, maybe 20 years from now, will be like Russia, okay? Two pieces to the puzzle. Extremely poor people and extremely rich people.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see what goes on. But as that struggle takes place over ideology on a national scale, we have problems at home, right? Which is what we talked about for the first hour and a half or so of the show. So this battle, I tell you, it is a battle. You know, when they say, you know, I think Joe Biden came out and said, you know, he's fighting for the soul of America. Well, for me, the soul of America are foundational Black Americans who built this country, and our souls are being trampled every single day. And until there is a focus to fight for that, then it is really not a fight for the soul of America. It is a fight.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to close with one little example. You know, in terms of how the whitewashing of the history has helped shape a myth about the United States. Like, for instance, if you talk to a lot of these folks, they'll say, well, Islam is a new religion in the United States. It's really 30, 40 years, and it's something new that the nation is grappling with, and that's why you have all of this noise around the religion. It's not true, Eric. The first Muslim came to the United States in 1520, okay? In 1804, in the White House, the first iftar was observed, okay? The Constitution could have said, in Jesus we trust, or, you know, they didn't say that. They said, in God we trust, because in deference to the millions of Muslims who were already part of the United States at the birth of our nation. There was actually a meeting of our nation's founders and the Muslim leaders in Turkey around the time of the formation of our nation, to make sure that Islam coexisted with Christianity, which was the dominant religion at that point of time. Mm-hmm. So that is a perfect example of how history has been whitewashed to extend or to propagate the purported point of view. Okay? And so, it's, like you said, the African American people are the foundation who put the building blocks of this nation together. Here's another example as to how folks have tried to whitewash the history. And I think that's why it's important for us, the African American Month and Women Month and all of these things that we do is important, because we have to rewrite and make sure that the kids, and see, the Generation Z and the millennials, I have a lot of confidence in them. These are very open-minded folks. They don't sign up for the same old. And I think if you give them the right tools and the education and knowledge, I think not only will the greatness of our nation be preserved, but there will be true greatness, not a whitewashed greatness.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, Sudan, thank you very much, man. Listen, you're welcome on any time.
Thank you, sir.
And when you're able to talk about the legal piece, we'd like to know about that. I understand why, you can't, right? It's pending. But to get insight on what the grappling is over this underfunding in the schools in Jersey City, and for people to be able to hear it unpacked and to realize that these issues that the past generations and possibly the future generations in Jersey City are experiencing aren't just happenstance. They're a direct result of policies that have been enacted upon that have led them
absolutely. And that's what I want to keep the focus on, because everything else is noise, Eric, and you got to draw the signal out of the noise. to ensure that, our kids, black and brown kids, have a fighting chance and have a real shot at the American dream, and that's why despite all of the pounding that I receive, and I know I will continue to receive, and just as I received in the last 3 years and beyond, I'm going to continue to be, a civic activist, a community organizer, and fight for our kids, and I think the sum of all of those building blocks across the various communities in the United States, and like I said, coupled with the fact that I think the generation that is coming up now, the Generation Z and the millennials, I'm optimistic about the future. Democracy is messy. It's not clean. It's ugly. But in the end, I think I'm confident that we'll get things done. I mean, just one quick last example: the fact that we had, as a board, to file a comprehensive lawsuit, constitutional challenge against the state. When you have a Democratic governor, Democratic Senate, Democratic Assembly, and despite all the threats to not do, not to sue the state, that's proof of, the fact that democracy is functioning. The fact that the court didn't throw the challenge out, didn't, give that summary judgment, but allowed the trial to move up. That's proof of the fact that, the three branches of the government are working. The fact that around the same time in October or November, the Education Law Center filed a similar constitutional challenge in the Supreme Court of New Jersey to fight for the infrastructure spending of all the urban districts, which essentially validated our legal claim, is proof of the fact that democracy is working. Is it messy? Yes. Will people fall by the wayside? Yes. Will people get pounded and be threatened, and will there be an attempt to destroy them? Yes. But if you look at the nation of our history, that's how it has always been, and that's how it will be. But as eternal optimists, we hope for a better day. I've always believed that our best days are ahead of us, and that's kind of the place where I'm in, and that's where I want to sign off on today. And I want to continue to engage with your show because I think your viewers need to know what's going on the other side of town, and I think this is a good dynamic.
Well, we're gonna get your Skype working, right? And
Yes,
and then after we listen, and then after we get your Skype, because you are a wealth of knowledge, so after we get your Skype working, then we're gonna work to see if we can get you on a schedule. If it's once a week or once a month or something, where you could talk to us about what's going on in Jersey City and any other thing that you want to share with us.
Absolutely, I would love that. I think a regular schedule with Skype working, I would love to absolutely do that.
I'm looking forward to it. Sudan Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Good office.
And you guys, please hit the share button and spread the word.
Yeah, and Diane, take care. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
There's only one way to be independent. There's only one way to be free. It's not something that someone gives to you. It's something that you take. Nobody can give you independence. Nobody can give you freedom. Nobody can give you equality or justice or anything. If you're a man, you take it. If you can't take it, you don't deserve it. Nobody can give it to you. I'm for anybody who's for freedom. I'm for anybody who's for justice. I'm for anybody who's for equality. I'm not for anybody who tells me to sit around and wait for mine.